Welcome to Site Building Hub. In today's video, we're going to go over the basics of Webflow. To follow along, the only thing you're going to need is a Webflow account. I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can access the registration from here. The video is divided in a set of different modules that will allow you to go beyond the basics and make the most out of Webflow's features. Whether you are creating your first Webflow website or you are looking to improve on your current skill set, we're going to nail it down in this video. Once we access Webflow's main website, we're going to go ahead and click the Get Started button right here. The first step to create your account is to register an email address. You can have a quick sign up using a Google account or just enter any other address. And right after, we're going to create the password for the account. The last step for the registration process is to answer a few questions that Webflow is going to ask you with regards to your website. Once you've completed the registration process, you're going to get the option of selecting within the set of templates they have. I'm going to go for the blank template in this case. And that's what we're going to be using in this video since we're building a website from scratch. Let's begin by going over the interface so you get to know how everything works in Webflow. First of all, we're going to break down the interface in three different parts. On the left side of the screen, we've got a menu that allows you to add new containers to your website and manage them. From a text block to a button, an image, or a video, we're going to be dragging them from the menu on the left side. The right side menu allows you to edit the properties of each one of the elements that you have in your template. So let's suppose that you added a text block from the menu on the left. The toolbar on the right would be where you can edit the size, the font, or color of the text. And finally, at the top of your screen, we've got a set of icons that allow you to toggle between the different versions of your website. Whether it is the desktop version, the tablet version, or the mobile version, you can access and edit each one of them from here. The eye icon on the left allows you to go into preview mode and see how the website would look in the browser. Generally speaking, that's how the interface works. You're going to get way more familiarized with it as we advance in the tutorial. In the meantime, let's dive into the first module. We're going to go over how to create and customize the elements on your template. Even if you see a whole lot of white space available in your template, at this point you will not be able to put any element in it. And the reason for that is you need to have a container within the template. Elements such as images, text, and videos can be placed on top of a container, but cannot be placed on the template on its own. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the containers. These are the three main containers we've got. Within the add icon, you can find the section container, the regular container, and the div block. We're going to be dragging each one of them to the template so you can see the difference. Let's start with the section container. This is a full width block of content where you can allocate any element. If we drag a container element, you're going to see that it is basically the same idea, but with the difference that there's margin in both the right and left side. And finally, let's add a div block. The div block works exactly the same as a section container. But here's the thing, if you wanted to set an empty container within another container, you would be better off putting a section container as the outer element and div containers within that section container. Webflow uses this rule to differentiate the hierarchy of all these content blocks. If you put a section container inside another section container, there might be warnings. This is not a mandatory rule as far as I know, but it's just to keep order in your layout. And now I'm just going to delete these elements and go back to a blank template. I'm going to begin by adding a section element. You can either drag it like we did it before or just click on it. Now that we got a section element, we're free to add anything inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and drag a set of columns inside of it. Every time you add an element within another block of content, there's going to be a guide that indicates which one's going to be the parent container. In this case, we got that blue tag in here that tells us that the section element is going to contain the columns. As soon as we let go, the column snaps into the section container. You can select the amount of columns by choosing on the settings box or dragging the slider. In this case specifically, I'm going to select 3. In case you change your mind after you've selected them, just go to the Settings tab on the menu on the right side. Make sure the columns are selected and you should find the same box. We're going to have the same customization settings in here. Let's go back to the Style tab, and now we're ready to place some elements within the columns. We're going to start by adding a heading title to each one of them. Let's click the Add Element button, and in here we're going to drag a heading element. As soon as we let go, we're going to get a settings box that allows us to select the type of heading we want for this element. We got from H1 all the way to H6. On the menu on the right, let's scroll down into the typography section. Here you can choose the size, the type of font you're going to be using, the style, the color, and the alignment. Within the typography section, you're going to find all of the styling options. As you can see, you are able to align the text to the center, to the right. You can justify the text, but in this case, I'm going to align it to the left. And underneath, you can toggle between bold and italic text. Let's add another heading element, this time to the column on the center. I'm going to select the same type of font, which is Open Sans, and make it a bit thicker. And I am going to finish by aligning it to the center. For the third column, we're going to be doing the exact same process, adding a heading element, making the font a bit thicker, and this time I'm going to be aligning it to the right. At this point, we've got 3 different heading elements. And we're now going to be adding an image for each one of the columns. We're going to drag them from the media section into the template. Once you let go of the element, you're going to find the settings box for the image. And you can also set the size of the image by clicking on the edge of the element and dragging it. But actually, I'm going to be changing the font size and the color for each one of the heading elements. So let's select it, go over to the typography section and set a pixel value in here. You can write a value directly or toggle the arrow keys to test the different sizes. Underneath, we've got the color selector. You can place the hex color code in here or select a custom color. Let's do the exact same thing for the next 2 columns, adding another image element and setting a different font color. The point of this is that we have 3 heading elements, and each one is different from the other one in terms of color, font weight, and alignment. But what happens if I wanted to add some spacing around the heading elements? Well, in order to do that, we're going to go over to the right side of the screen all the way to the top of the toolbar. And we're going to toggle the values within this spacing square. You can toggle the padding, which is the spacing within the main container. In this case, within the heading container. It is illustrated by that green rectangle which is on top of the text. As you can see, it is located within the heading container. And in case you wanted to edit the spacing outside of the container, we could go ahead and edit the margin values. It is illustrated by the blue spacing on top of the container. You can edit the margin and padding for the left side, the right side, the top and bottom of each one of the elements. Essentially, what we've seen at this point is how you can edit the properties of each one of the elements you add to your template. And we're now going to learn how to automate the design of your website's components. We are going to start off by adding a heading element. Let's now define a class for this heading element. We're going to go all the way to the top right corner, and in the class input, we're going to write down the name. This is going to be named Title class. You gotta make sure your heading element is selected while you're doing this. Having a class will allow us to register all the styling details within that element. So in the future, every time we call that class upon any selected element, it's gonna pull all the styling characteristics that we have defined. Alright, so in this case, we're gonna leave a black font color, change the font weight, the font size, and align the heading element to the middle. So now this class is going to carry on the styling details to any element that we set it to. Alright, so now let's go ahead and add the site title class to each one of the heading elements above. As you can see, they are all resized, they are all realigned, reshaped, completely according to that class. So this is essentially how you can create classes to reuse the styling for as many elements as you like. But what happens if you wanted to apply the same principle, but instead of targeting elements, you would like to target full containers? When I say container, what I mean is a group of elements arranged as a single unit. To illustrate that, I'm going to be adding a container element, and within that, I'm going to set a heading element and a paragraph element. Let's now select the container, right-click, and go to the option at the bottom that says Create Symbol. We just gotta name it. In this case, I'm just gonna label it text, since it is a text container. And now we can reuse this text container, whether we choose to do it in this page or in another page. In this case, we're going to be creating a new page. This is pretty simple. We're going to go over to the Pages menu, and on the top right icon, we're going to click the Add Page button. I'm going to simply name it Page 2. Let's go to Page 2, and in here, we're going to select the Symbols menu. In here, we're going to find the text symbol we've previously created. In order to add it, just click on it. And now, the awesome thing about this is if we were to make a change to any of these containers, the change will also take place on the other one. If I were to edit in the home page, the changes will also take place on page 2. And if I would edit on page 2, the changes will also take place on the home page. This is very effective when it comes to using specific containers repeatedly across your website. Whether it is a menu bar or a banner, handling it through symbols makes it a lot easier. As you can see, using both classes and symbols can enhance the process of creating your website by a lot. We are now going to have a quick overview on how you can work with media files in your website. You want to start by populating the media library. Let's go over to the menu, and in the media section, you can drag and drop the files that you're going to be using. If you got any image containers on your website, it's just a matter of clicking the gear icon within that and selecting the Choose Image button. You're going to go over to the media library, and now it's just a matter of clicking on the image that you're going to be using. I'm going to be doing the exact same process on the rest of the image containers in here. And now I'm going to teach you how you can create a banner. We're going to start by adding a section container and dragging it all the way to the top. You can also use the toolbar on the right side to indicate where you want your element. Once in here, let's go over to the background section. Let's click the plus icon next to the Images and Gradients label, and then select Choose Image. You're going to notice that the image is now in place within the container. In order to see it, we're going to make the container a bit larger. Let's go over to the Size section and change the height value. I'm going to set it to 500 pixels. In order for us to edit the image visibility, we're going to go back to the background section and click the image link. Within the size control, we are going to select Cover. This is going to help us stretch the image to fit the size of the container. We can also add elements inside of the banner. For example, I'm going to drag a title. I'm going to start by changing the font color, the font weight, and removing the margin on top. I'm finally going to add some padding on top of the text, and that's pretty much it. If you wanted to change the image, you can go back down to the background section, click on the image and choose a different one. Perfect. I want to show you a few more things, so I'm going to go ahead and add a set of columns at the bottom of the template. Just going to make sure that the set of columns are located within a section container. It is not mandatory, but every time I am creating a website, if I am adding a new section, I just make sure that I create a section container before adding anything else. This practice allows me to keep more consistency and order when I'm building a website. For the column on the right, we're going to be adding a slider element. It is located all the way down in the components section. Perfect. Let's now click on the slider element and go over to the settings tab on top of the toolbar. Here in the settings box, you can select whether you want to add a new slide, change the animation for each transition, or the duration of the slide. Since we want it to be an image slider, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the banner. We're going to go back to the design tab, go to the background section and select an image to be the background of the slide. We are now going to select the second slide and choose a different image. And if you want, you can also add other elements on top of your slide. For example, I'm going to be adding a heading element to slide number 2. As you can see, creating an image slider with Webflow is pretty straightforward. And now we are going to go over how you can use videos within your website. I'm going to start by clearing the columns. We're going to go over the 3 different ways you can do so. First of all, I'm going to add a video container, and on the column right next to it, I'm going to add a YouTube container. If you want to add a YouTube video, you got to click the YouTube container, set the URL, and it will retrieve the video automatically. If you wanted to add videos from any other website, you can do so by selecting the video container and setting the URL. And finally, you can also add videos from a specific file within your computer by selecting a video background, which is located all the way down in the components section. Let's go to the preview screen, and this is how the videos would come together on a live website. Let's now jump into creating the website's navigation. We're going to begin by adding a new element. This time, let's go to the Layouts tab, and in here, we can find pre-made containers that already arrange a set of elements within. I'm going to choose the Cards section and drag it into the template. I'm going to leave it there for now, and let's go up to the section above for a second. And now I'm going to link the first heading to page 2. Once you've labeled it, hover over it and click the hyperlink icon. And this text is now transformed into a link. Click on the gear icon to see the options that you have for your link. You can either link to a custom URL, link to another page within your website, to a specific page section within your website, to an email address, or a phone number. We're going to go ahead and link to page number 2 by selecting it in the drop-down menu. If you want to create a specific page section, which in this case is going to be card 1, you got to select the element. And once you've selected it, you got to set an ID for that element. Make sure that you are within the settings tab, and just like we did with the classes, within the ID label, let's set a name for that section. And now let's go over to the second heading, turn it into a link, and connect it to the section ID that we've just created. And now let's preview the functionality of both of the links. The first one takes us to page number 2, and as soon as we click on the other one, we're going to slide through the content of the page into the section that we've selected. This is essentially the way in which you can create navigation links within your website. If you want to create an external URL, you just have to select the link and paste it inside the URL input. Let's put all of this into practice by creating an actual navigation menu. You can get pre-made navigations from 2 different places. You can get one from the Components section in the Elements tab, or you can also go to the Layouts tab and get a pre-made sticky nav. I'm going to tell you the difference. Let's go for the sticky nav and put it on top of the website. You can also use the Navigator tool to arrange the elements on your website. As you can see, when you use a sticky navigation bar, it stays on top of your website. If we go to the mobile view, this is how it comes together. Let's now take a look at the navigation bar in the Components section and check the differences between both of them. Right off the bat, the navigation bar from the Components section is a bit thinner. Aside from that, every time you scroll through the website, it's going to stay up It's no longer going to follow you around like the sticky navigation. If we go to the mobile view, there's another difference. The navigation bar we just added has a toggle switch. And this feature makes it ideal when it comes to designing a responsive website. So in this case, we're going to be using this navigation bar and get rid of the sticky nav that we added before. Let's now build our very own navigation bar. First of all, we are going to transform the contact button into a link for our second page. I'm going to get rid of the other two links. I'm just going to select them and delete them. And now let's try it out. Page 2 is looking a bit empty, so I'm going to be adding the nav bar in here as well. It is basically the exact same element, but in another page. So remember, the best way to do it is by creating a symbol out of it. We're going to call it nav. Let's go over to page number 2, click the symbols menu and select it. And now I'm just going to place it on top of the page. Perfect. Let's go back and I'm going to copy and paste the page 2 item and make this second one a link for the home page. And finally, I'm going to link this item to the home page. Let's go ahead and preview the website. We can now go from the home page to the second page and from the second page back to the home page. This is pretty much how you can create a navigation menu for your website. And for the last element, let's go over to the left side of the menu bar into the brand container. This works just like any other menu item. You can link it to an internal or external URL. And if we go over to the navigator, you're going to see that there's a link icon right next to it. I'm going to go ahead and drag an image container within that box. This is going to be our fictional logo image. Once in here, I'm just going to select one of the pictures we have in the assets library. If it's too large, remember you can drag the edges to resize it to whatever size you want. I'm going to move the image element to the top and to get rid of the brand link. I'm not going to be using it in here since I've got the home button on the navigation bar. I'm just going to fit the image to the menu bar, and now let's preview the website. By looking at the preview, we can notice that there's a spacing in both the left and right sides of the navigation bar. This comes as a result of this element having already some margin values predefined into it. To be honest, it's a bit too much for this website, so I'm going to be editing out these margin values. Let's begin by opening up the navigator, and first of all, I want you to notice the structure of the nav bar. Inside of it, we're going to find a container, and inside of that container element, there's all of the contents that we just created for the menu. Now, the main property of a container element is that it has a predefined margin for both left and right sides. So, in order to fix the margins, we just gotta drag each one of the elements outside of the container. Dragging the elements outside of the container removes that extra margin. Now that we got all the elements outside of the container, we're gonna go ahead and delete it. And we are now free to set our very own margins. I'm going to select the logo image, go over to the spacing section, and for the left side, I'm going to add a margin of 60 pixels. And we are going to match that by selecting the last element of the navbar menu and setting a 60 pixel margin on the right side. And just as simple as that, we've got our navbar finished. And now, to wrap up the navigation section of this tutorial, I want to show you how you can create link icons. In this case, we are going to be creating a couple of social media icons. I'm going to start by going over to the Layouts tab and adding a footer element. I'm only going to be using the copyright section, so the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the container above. We are going to add our very own container, and inside of it, I'm going to drag a set of columns. I'm gonna leave it at 2 columns. And now I'm gonna go over to the basics section and drag a link block. A link block is basically a container that holds a URL. And in this case, we're gonna set an image within that container. So every time somebody clicks on that image, they're gonna be redirected to whatever URL we set. In this context, we are gonna be using a social media icon as the image. But before setting the image, I'm gonna go ahead, select the column, go over to the typography section and align the elements of the column to the right. I'm gonna redo everything for the column on the right, but with the difference that this time I'm gonna be aligning the elements to the left. And now the way we're gonna set an icon is by choosing a background image. So first of all, I'm gonna be adding the icons to the media bank. And now that we got it, just remember that we have to set a background of cover just so the image fits the size of the container. But we can do further editing by going over to the size section and selecting a height and width value. Alright, so let's try 50 pixels by 50 pixels. And I think it's too big, so I'm gonna go with 20 by 20. We are gonna do the exact same for the block on the right. I'm just going to be selecting a different icon. And finally, just to finish this off, I'm going to be setting a URL for each one of the icons. Let's go over to the preview, and now you're going to see that every time we click on each one of the icons, we're going to get redirected to the URL we set. And essentially, this is how you can create a navigation within your website or from your website to an external source. And now we are going to take a look at how we can edit the website for the mobile view. The first thing you got to notice is on top of your template, you're going to find a few device icons. Each one of them represents the type of screen you are going to be editing. So in this case, you can edit for a tablet screen, a mobile phone on landscape orientation, or a mobile phone on regular orientation. We're going to go ahead and select the mobile phone on a regular orientation. Oftentimes, what we are going to be focusing the most when it comes to editing on mobile is arranging things such as sizes, spacing, and the placement of the elements within the template. So let's begin by reducing the margin that we've got for the logo image. I'm going to set it to 10 pixels. Let's go back to the desktop version just to show that each change we create on each one of the views is exclusive to that specific view. So if we've made a change in the mobile view, it's going to stay in the mobile view. The same applies if we make a change in the desktop view, the tablet view, and so on. Remember that we can create space between two different elements by adding a margin. So for example, I'm going to be adding a margin bottom to this image right here so we can space it out from the text block. And now I'm going to go all the way down to the footer and align the social media icons to the center. And as we've said it before, this change will only affect the mobile view. And now, if you wanted to hide an element in the mobile view but display it in the desktop view and vice versa, you got to be on the lookout for the hide icon. It is located in the layout section. And if we switch back to the desktop version, you're going to see that the banner text is visible in here. And now I'm just going to go back to the mobile view and turn the visibility on again. And you do it by clicking on the display button in the layout section. And now, just to wrap it up, I'm going to be adding some spacing between the rest of the elements. Alright guys, I hope this video helps you have a better understanding on how Webflow works. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.